Greetings. I am Dr. Noni Davis, and I am coming to you from Sya Academy's Shule, our private school here in Durham, North Carolina, focusing on African centered education. And I am a legacy owner. My school will be next month, will be 30 years in session. I started the school with my parents, Mother Sylvia Davis, and my father, my late father, William Edward Davis, in 1996. And so I always want to honor them and give thanks to my ancestors who have undergirded me and prepared me for this work that I do. Um, so today I wanted to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. Next week we're celebrating his birthday, which is actually on the 15th, which is, I think, what, Thursday. But I was 6 years old when Dr. King was assassinated. And my family was very active in politics. My parents were part of the um, civil rights, the no, not civil rights, but the Black student movement over at Chapel Hill um, during that time. Then I was also my mom taught in public schools in Chapel Hill. My father was part of the campaign, the election campaign for Howard Lee. He became the first Black mayor of Chapel Hill, and so they participated that. So in the late from the late 60s to the early 1970s, I was a child of the civil rights movement, and like I said, my I was living in a very politically active household, full of American literature, African American literature, let's see, science books, because my parents were students, history, and a lot introduction to African culture as well. I'll never forget my parents were friends with this gentleman named Ndebisi, and he was from Nigeria, and he used to entertain us with conversations because we asked him, we were children, so we asked the most insane questions. And he said he was going to have us over for dinner one night, and we were like, "Oh, so are we going to have rhino and elephant?" And he was like, "Yes, absolutely." And so when we went to his house, and it was, I think he served like steak and something like that, and we were like, beef steak or whatever, and we were like, "Well, what happened to the?" We were just ridiculous. But he was so patient with us, and he was the first person to give me my first medallion. I had a necklace, and it was the red Africa with red, black, and green. And so I must have been about 9 or 10 years old when I got that, and I was so proud. But and uh, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. My dad used to play these LP albums, which had speeches of these leaders, and so I remember, like on Sunday morning, we would hear Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech on this huge black LPs, and Malcolm X's speech. We would listen to that. And like I said, I read Malcolm X's autobiography. Um, Written by Alex Haley. I read Tally's Corner, something I probably should never have had in my possession. We also did Black Boy. I remember reading Native Son, and these books were like way above my understanding. I was only 8, 9, 10 years old, but I remember reading all of these things. And so these experiences in my home, living with a teacher, and my dad was an X-ray technician over there at Chapel Hill, is what cultivated my thirst for knowledge. I had a very actively engaged intellectual household, and but I was an adult before I had a chance to read any of Dr. King's literature. And one of my books, which I cannot find, is Strength to Love, and I don't know where it is. I put it somewhere, but I can't find it on my shelf, so it's probably stuck somewhere. And then I also read Where Do We Go From Here? And then this is another one. Let's see, Why We Can't Wait. And so these are, the books that we have in my school collection. And then we have books that his wife wrote for him, but I like reading things in his voice. And Dr. King was an amazing visionary and a brilliant person. He was so prolific. He entered college Morehouse at the age of 15 years old and entered his PhD program at 23 years old at Boston University. And he pledged Alpha Phi Alpha over there and everything. But this man was a true African genius. And so what I wanted to do is pull some of the passages that stood out to me when I read this book. I don't usually underline books, but underline sections. But this book, I had to like, whoa, oh my goodness. And the message in this book, unfortunately for Americans, has not changed. We're still stuck in a lot of ways or still facing some of the same situations that, just 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago, because I was born in 61. So we're still in 64 years later. Some of the things that he has said in this book are still very profound and relatable to where we are right now. And so, when put in context with America's political climate today, we realize that every gain African Americans have made has truly been because of our own efforts. And since we stepped on this continent, um, it has been our fight for our freedom, led by us, conducted by us, persisted by us, and accomplished by us. There has been empathy from European. I mean, we have our comrades. We have those folks who have been dedicated to our fight for equality in this country, but it has mostly been a very small sector of European Americans, and so most of our freedom is at our hands. And so, there's a whole notion that Abraham Lincoln freed us. It's just nonsense because if it hadn't been for these are two of my favorite people, Dr. Dr. Martin Delaney, the brother, in 18. I'm trying to think what year. I think it was April. Oh, I can't remember when it was, but he was assigned to be a major. He was a doctor, and he was the first major in in the army, black major in the army. And then, of course, we all know Frederick Douglass. But these two guys, Frederick Douglass and Dr. Martin Delaney, were the ones that went to Abraham Lincoln and told him, "You better let these black men fight for their liberty." And they were losing that war. They were losing the Civil War up until then. And so, you know, for Abraham Lincoln finally conceded. He said, "Okay, okay." I think Martin Luther King was like Malcolm X, and Freddie Douglass may have been more like Dr. King, but he made this dude, Dr. Major Martin Delaney, the first major, and he said, "You go get your troops." And so he led these United States colored troops. And after conversation with him, that's when that Emancipation Proclamation was written, and then giving these African American men a right and the opportunity to fight for their own freedom. And what's crazy is that the last battle, we're getting ready to do Mobile, Alabama, right? The last battle in the Civil War, they said it was Texas, but the one in Alabama was the one that preceded Texas. 5,000 U.S. troops fought. 5,000 black U.S. Colored troops fought in that battle and won, and they beat the boys to death. It was the last battle at Fort Blakely, which is just down the street from Mobile, Alabama. So Alabama has a lot of history. And even this one, I mean, a lot of us don't know. This was April 9th, 1865. And they won with 5,000 African Americans, U.S. colored troops that defeated, beat the Confederacy down, tore them up. So, what the first passage I wanted to read was on page 4. And so this is, oh, where do we go from here? So, page 4. Why is equality so assiduously avoided? Why does white America delude itself? And how does it rationalize the evil it retains? The majority of white Americans consider themselves sincerely committed to justice for the Negro. So apparently during this time, most of them were saying, yeah, we're good. We want to be free. They believe that American society is essentially hospitable to fair play and to steady growth toward a middle class utopia embodying racial harmony. But unfortunately, this is a fantasy of self deception and comfortable vanity. Overwhelmingly, America is still struggling with irresolution and contradictions. It has been sincere and even ardent in welcoming some change, but too quickly, apathy and disinterest rise to the surface when the next logical steps are to be taken. Laws are passed in a crisis mood after a Birmingham or a Selma, but no substantial fervor survives the formal signing of legislation. The recording of the law in itself is treated as the reality of reform. So basically, in the 60s or the 50s or whatever, he was, it's like white folks just have a lot of talk. Okay, we can talk about this freedom, we can talk about this legislation, we can talk about it, but just because I talked about it should be enough for you. And you don't need anything else from me. Leave me alone. And we know you need your freedom, but we're going to give it to you in increments according to when we are ready for that to happen. And so I was encouraged reading this section because, to me, this passage reveals that we have never been able to fully rely on anyone but ourselves because our freedom is our goal. We had our John Brown as the exception, not the rule, when it comes to creating an equitable society for all humans. Um, and so this section just really shows you how all along, they could have just done this in one final sweep in 1865, give everybody their freedom, but they didn't. So there's always been this push and pull with we push, and then they pull us back a little bit, push, pull us back a little bit, and we still make serious achievements, but it's unnecessary fight. Why are we still fighting? It's just what in the world is wrong with people that they just can't let us have what we need. So then on page 11, uh, here in the middle of the page, these are the deepest causes for contemporary abrasions between the races. Loose and easy language about equality, resonant resolutions about brotherhood fall pleasantly on the ear. But for the Negro, there is a credibility gap he cannot overlook. He remembers that with each modest advance, the white population promptly raises the argument that the Negro has come far enough. Each step forward accents an present tendency to backlash. We are right there right now. This characterization is necessarily general. It would be grossly unfair to omit recognition of a minority of whites who genuinely want authentic equality. Their commitment is real, sincere, and is expressed in 1,000 deeds. But they are balanced at the other end of the pole by the unregenerate segregationists who have declared that democracy is not worth having if it involves equality. The segregationist goal is the total reversal of all reforms with reestablishment of naked oppression and, if need be, a native form of fascism. Dr. King said this in 19 68. Wow. And so America had a master race in the antebellum South, reestablishing it with a resurgent Klan and a totally disenfranchised lower class would realize the dream of too many extremists on the right. The great majority of Americans are suspended between these opposing attitudes. They are uneasy with injustice, but unwilling yet to pay a significant price to eradicate it. I think we're at a point where they're going to have to pay a price. The persistence of racism in depth and the dawning awareness that Negro demands will necessitate structural changes in society, having generated a new phase of white resistance in both the North and the South. To halt to a halt. Or reduce it to a crawl. So they're trying to reduce the civil rights movement to a halt or at least to a crawl. Negro demands that yesterday evoked admiration and support today to many have become tiresome, unwarranted, and a disturbance to the enjoyment of life. Cries of Black power and riots are not the causes of white resistance, they are the consequences of it. So I'm like, okay, white folks. Meanwhile, frustration and a loss of confidence in white power have engendered among many Negroes a response that is essentially a loss of confidence in themselves. They are failing to appreciate two important facts. First, the line of progress is never straight. For a period or a movement may follow a straight line and then it encounters obstacles and the path bends. It is like curving around a mountain when you're approaching a city. Often it feels as though you were moving backward and you lose sight of your goal, but in fact, you are moving ahead, and soon you will see the city again, closer by. We are encountering just such an experience today, the inevitable counter revolution that succeeds every period of progress is taking place. Failing to understand this is a normal process of development. Some Negroes are falling into unjustified pessimism and despair, focus on focusing on the ultimate goal and discovering it still distant. They declare no progress at all has been made. And I have heard folks say this, but every time we do something, here we go. Black people are so far behind and we're not accomplishing anything. But this backlash that we're facing right now is because we had a black president and they lost their minds. And so this was Dr. King said it. This mood illustrates another fact that has been misinterpreted. A final victory is an accumulation of many short term encounters. So black people don't give up. We all right. We win some, you lose some, but it doesn't mean you are lost. It just means you got to keep persevering, right? And so to lightly dismiss a success because it does not usher in a complete order of justice is to fail to comprehend the process of achieving full victory. It underestimates the value of confrontation and dissolves the confidence born of a partial victory by which new efforts are powered. The argument that the Negro has made no progress in a decade of turbulent effort rests on demonstrable facts that paint an ugly picture of stagnation in many areas, including income levels, housing, and schools. But from a deeper perspective, which I appreciated with this, is that he said we have to look at the gains and look at where the gains were made. So he says, from a deeper perspective, a different conclusion emerges. The increase in segregated schools and expanded slums are developments confined largely to the North. Substantial progress has been achieved in the South. The struggles of the past decade were not national in scope, they were Southern. They were specifically designed to change life in the South, and the principal role of the North was supportive. It would be a serious error to misconstrue the movement strategy by measuring Northern accomplishments when virtually all programs were applied in the South and sought remedies applicable solely to it. So I was encouraged when reading this section because it is still true that a lot of African Americans will make disparaging comments about the success of our and hurdles that we have overcome. But Dr. King's analogy of our progress moving in a straight line and then being encountering some kind of block or hindrance, it caused us to have to change our pathway and then and direction. And it doesn't mean we're off course. It just means that the path is new and more work needs to be done as we move forward. And I really appreciated the way he established that the southern states were the ones that made the most significant progress during this time, because the South was also facing Klan. You had racism in the North, but you had the Klan. You didn't have you had voting, you had problems with voting, you had problems with jobs, you had problems with poverty, but most of the strategies were in the South. And so the South was making progress, but there wasn't a lot of focus on what was going on in the North. And so that I thought that was okay, that's a balanced view. And so in passages 37 to 38, okay, did I do it? Okay, 37, 38. I think I've got it. All right. So in this passage, he talks about Black power. 37. So in its broad and positive meaning is a call to Black people to amass the political economic strength to achieve their legitimate goals. No one can deny that the Negro is in dire need of this kind of legitimate power. We need our own power. Indeed, one of the great problems that the Negro confronts is his lack of power. From the old plantations of the South to the newer ghettos of the North, the Negro has been confined to a life of voicelessness and powerlessness, stripped of the right to make decisions concerning his life and destiny. He has been subject to the authoritarian and sometimes whimsical decisions of the white power structure. So we know that after Reconstruction, when all these Black men got into these positions in Congress, I think it was like 13, 14 of them, here comes the backlash. And then, we established our own cities and communities. And so in the 1920s, here comes some more, 1900s, here comes some more backlash. And so this is just normal. And Black people need to understand, one of the reasons why we don't know is because a lot of us don't know our own history, but we have continuously fought to establish ourselves. The problem of transforming the ghetto is therefore a problem of power, a confrontation between the forces of power demanding change and forces of power dedicated to preserving the status quo. Power, properly understood, is the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic changes. In this sense, power is not only desirable, but necessary in order to implement the demands of love and justice. One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power are usually contrasted as polar opposites. Love is identified with a resignation of power, and power with a denial of love. Uh, um, let's see, the will to power to reject the Christian concept. Oh, wait. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject the philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. So, in other words, it's weak. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. There is nothing essentially wrong with power. The problem is that in America, power is unequally distributed. This has led Negro Americans in the past to seek their goals through love and moral suasion, devoid of power. So we've had these peaceful protests, and even he's saying, nonviolence or whatever. But it is leading to a few extremists today to advocate for Negroes the same destructive and conscienceless power that they have justly abhorred in whites. And so I think this is where he's talking about Black power, about some of the violence in the Black power movement. It is precisely this collision of immoral power with powerless morality, which constitutes the major crisis of our times. So here he says Black power is a call for the pooling of Black financial resources to achieve economic security, with the ultimate answer to the Negro's economic dilemma will be found in a massive federal program for all the poor along the lines of A. Philip Randolph's Freedom Budget, a kind of Marshall Plan for the disadvantaged. There is something that the Negro himself can do to throw off the shackles of poverty. So, in this passage, I felt that Dr. King was concerned that the Black Power movement was adopting this need for power in the same manner of white supremacists. And we know that he marched with Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, um, and there was an argument about when self-defense was appropriate, um, when at your home was one thing, but during a protest was another. And Dr. King was a gun owner, and especially after his home was bombed in 1956. But he later gave them up because he believed that that it was contradictory to his position on nonviolence. But ultimately, he believed in self-defense, and for those who felt like they knew that they needed it, and um, in their home, and personal choice while in protest marches. It could, while in protest marches, it would not be good because it could escalate the violence. So, and then on a side note, I wanted to say that during his march to Selma, they said that there were African American soldiers and snipers were lined from Selma to Montgomery. That while they were not carrying guns, his bodyguards were stationed on the outer rim of the protesters. But even along the roadside, there were African American soldiers who had veterans who took positions along that road to make sure that no one got killed. And they said that the federal troops were present, but they also had to consider that they were fighting against these white police officers who would be uh, or police, agencies in the South would were going to be violent. So they did have to make sure they armed themselves and protected themselves along those routes. And so the last page I want to read is um, out of the soil of slavery came the psychological roots of the Black Power cry. Anyone familiar with the Black Power movement recognizes that defiance of white authority and white power is a constant theme. The defiance almost becomes a kind of taunt. Underneath it, however, there is a legitimate concern that the Negro break away from unconditional submission and thereby assert his own selfhood. Another obvious reaction of Black power to the American system of slavery is the determination to glory in the Blackness and to resurrect joyously the African past. In response to the emphasis on their masters' enormous power, Black Power advocates contend that the Negro must develop his own sense of strength, no longer our fear, awe, and obedience to rule. This accounts for, though it does not justify, some Black Power advocates who encourage contempt and even uncivil disobedience as alternates to the old patterns of slavery. Black power assumes that Negroes will be slaves unless there is a new power to counter the force of the men who are still determined to be masters rather than brothers. Black power is a psychological reaction to the psychological indoctrination that led to the creation of the perfect slave. Um, while this reaction has often led to negative and unrealistic responses and has frequently brought about intemperate words and actions, one must not overlook the positive value in calling the Negro to a new sense of manhood, to a deep feeling of racial pride, and to an audacious appreciation of his heritage. The Negro must be grasped by a new realization of his dignity and worth. He must stand up amid a system that still oppresses him and develop an unassailable and majestic sense of his own value. He must no longer be ashamed of being Black. And so this book, it's just so poignant to me. It's very relevant for what we're going through right now with the destruction of many of the civil rights policies that we have had passed back when I was a little girl and to now. And so, wow. I encourage everyone to read.
And if you brought that book up and everything like that, because I know that way back in 1979, when I was going to a journalism camp and everything like that, that was actually what we had to write the essay revolving around was in order to get into the camp, what we thought that Dr. King would be thinking at that particular time. So that was written maybe about a decade after he wrote that book. But
Right.
I know that I wrote in my essay that he would still be thinking about a lot of these same issues, whether it was around homelessness, whether it was around race relations, or whether it was around a number of the other issues that we are still facing some almost 60 years after he wrote that book and everything like that. So it's just amazing that we're still in that period. Because I remember when I wrote my
Yeah.
essay in the summer of 19, well, the I think I wrote the essay in either the spring or the winter of 79 because the camp was in the summer of 79
Right.
and
Right.
everything like that. So I remember there was journalists or potential journalists and folks like that at the UNC that were from Maryland, South Carolina, Virginia. It was about a 4 or 5 state radius. I think the furthest might have been South Carolina because I don't think we had anybody from Georgia. It might have been somebody from Georgia, but I know definitely South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland were all involved in there. And some of us did go off into the journalism profession. Some of them went off into business and other professions as well as I think one of them became a nurse in Richmond, Virginia, and
Okay.
everything like that. But I just remember that that's something we had to write, and there may even be copies of that
Yeah.
as I say laying around somewhere, either in my parents' house or in other places as well.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking to myself as you were talking about that book. I remember that book because back in 1979 when they had written that in the late 60s and everything. So I had written in that particular essay, I was like pointing some of the similarities. And like you were saying, there's those things that we're fighting with some
Mhm.
50 years after I wrote my essay, or not 50, but 47 years after
Crazy.
I wrote my essay and everything like that, that he would have been dealing with 57 or 60 years ago and everything like that. So some of these same issues are still pressing.
And it's amazing. These people voted for him, and this is like we're like, what are we going back like this?
Yep.
But
Yes.
America's crazy. I mean, and so, but it seems like this time there is going to be some infighting.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to, just like the Civil War,
Mhm.
they're going to have their own another civil war amongst themselves. I mean, black
Yeah.
people are like, look, you know what, y'all fight, y'all fight.
Yeah, yeah, y'all do what y'all want to do because there even seems like there's some conflict among the MAGA wing where some of them are breaking off and ready to start their own wing. I know that MTJ and Marjorie Taylor Greene and
Yeah.
others seem like they are breaking away and everything like that. So yeah, there seems like there is some infighting among even their own wing. We even see that in some of the ways that they were reacting to Renee Goods
Mhm.
being slain there in Minneapolis and everything like that.
Oh, really? Did they come out like what? Were they upset or were they
There's the last poll that I saw said that 27% are thinking that it was not a justifiable shooting. So there's a lot of people, it's like 2 to 1 that are thinking that it was not justifiable and everything like that. So they're thinking that the ICE agent was in the wrong. And some of those, I believe, are people that are members or were members of MAGA in the past and everything. So it does
okay?
seem like there are some people that are
But their
concerned.
space is shrinking.
Yeah,
His base is shrinking, and
yeah,
that's really good because especially when you consider 70 million, only 70 million people really voted for him.
right, right.
If that's 70 million, if only 27% of that group likes him, we already know nobody on the other side likes
Like,
you. You got a very small percentage of people who actually voted who think you are okay. You're crazy, but
yeah, well, I mean, like I said, he's trying to be an emperor right now and everything because I know it sounds like he's trying to bring back the empire age. Because I know on the show before you, I was talking about how apparently the Senate reads every year the speech of George Washington, the president of the United States, the early president, and where he said that he was not a fan of us being overly involved in the world politics and everything like that. So they reread it, but I don't know that the senators are actually listening to it, even though they reread it. And this is the 250th anniversary of the creation of the United States, because that was 1776 and everything.
right,
But
right,
I
right,
don't know
right.
that they reread, even though they're rereading it, are they actually listening? Because they say that you can
Well,
hear
well,
something. Are you listening?
But this year they're gonna have to look at that thing like, wait a minute, did we just go to Venezuela? Are we talking about going into Greenland? And I mean, these people in Europe said, "You come in here, we're taking all your base, we're closing every base down." So it's insane where we are.
Yeah.
But I said, let me go look at Dr. King, see what he had to say. Because I remember this book is full of me. I have all these passages underlined because I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books of Dr. King, like I said, partially because of me writing that essay, but I'm also a big fan of his letters from the Birmingham jail and everything like that. So he's got some great works and everything. And he was definitely talking about even some stuff around labor rights and other things that we are still dealing with, and not just here, but globally. Because I saw that in Paris, a bunch of the farmers were on strike because they were frustrated by one of the deals that was going on there. So his work was global at the time because he impacted a lot of people like Gandhi and others as well. But he definitely is still continuing to impact a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, he is. The man is amazing, and people need to just, no one is perfect. We don't have to agree with everything, but he was just brilliant the way he could analyze situations and bring it right to he knew exactly what to say. This is what is going on. And it was and so he deserves to have this day. And I don't care what Dum Dum does.
Right.
That Neanderthal up there in the White House says, we need to give him give this man honor this because he was profound. And if he wasn't a problem, you wouldn't have killed him.
Yep, he needs his flowers and everything. And on that note, we're ready to get on out of here with another great show and everything like that. But I just had to come in there when I was seeing what you were reading about. And I was like, I know that book and everything like that.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Mark, you have a great evening.
You do say.
Okay, peace.
Peace.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So talk, they hear you. You can do it if you try.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I know my mother.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can play the drum.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Sya student.